A very good morning to all.
Good morning.
Yeah. So we have with us today Professor Jaideep Sarangi from Kolkata, and it's my pleasure to welcome you, sir, to this online platform of Expert Speaks at JGND PSOU. So, Jagat Guru Nanak Dev Punjab State Open University has always been endeavoring to bring forward certain programs and extension lectures for the students so that it can enhance their understanding about whatever they are studying. So, the reflections on theoretical and methodological divergences and the ways in which the texts are grouped is not new. This is being done, since centuries, and we have various approaches which tell us how we have to study and analyze the text. Especially for the third semester this time, we have literary criticism paper. Language and literary studies have been studying the text, the context, and the style. But with the increasing number of books available these days, especially on the digital platform, computational approaches are also proliferating. So these new methods and interrelated fields of study need the advice and the suggestions that are to be contributed by an expert. So we have with us today Professor Jaideep Sarangi, who's a critic, he's a poet, he has written many volumes and edited many anthologies, and he's a principal at New Alipur College, Kolkata. Today, he is going to speak about the new markers in literary studies and is going to focus on the democratization of English studies, uh, which with different backgrounds. So, the literatures in English from different stratified positions within and outside India are becoming the trends. So, sir is today going to enhance our understanding about the plural spaces in English, and these will include the voices from diaspora as well. Over to you, Professor Jaideep Sarangi, and we welcome you to JGND PSOU.
Thank you, Dr. Navleen Multani, Madam, the Honorable Vice Chancellor of the University, all members and board members of the Department of English. Am I audible? Yeah. Okay.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, fine. To the university and those brilliant students who are listening and joining us for this session. I thank all of you for this invitation, and I accept it as a part of my inbuilding process of consciousness of being an Indian. At the very outset, I must tell you that with more than 2-3 generations of English studies in India, English is not merely a foreign language these days. It is as a vernacular language like Punjabi or Bengali or Tamil or Telugu or Hindi. So, dear students and colleagues from different colleges and universities and the university concerned, we at the very outset must understand English is not the language that we are talking about or not the language through which we express our feelings, thoughts, is a kind of aligned kind of language. In Indian context, English has been a normalized, nationalized language and a very much part of our repertoire and very much part of our life and blood process. You know, India shines with vernaculars. If one or two things which are to describe India in one or two sentences, the heart of India is the vernaculars. And the beauty lies of the Indians, of the exotic cultures which constitutes the heart of India. And of course, the heart of India by mean the translations. As in this very good afternoon. I'm talking from another space, Kolkata to Punjab, one culture, journey to another culture, one language, linguistic background to another linguistic background, which is almost like a plural space, as Madam has already embarked on it. The democratization of English, which is a major milestone of learning English. No, I say not only learning English, but assimilating it for effective uh, articulation as well as in expression through writings, through speaking, and through formation of a dialogic relationship with the world around us. By which I mean, if we think of the development of English and the naturalization of English, by word naturalization, I mean it is not a forced imposition to learn English, but is a natural learning of English, like a child learns Punjabi or Bengali at home, that English has become our own language through which we can express ourselves effectively, creatively, as well as critically. Madam has already mentioned the critical outpour of English studies. When we were students, we learned British literature. Simultaneously, we learned British criticism. That means Shakespeare, Shakespearean criticism. That means what the critics talk on Shakespeare, what are the texts of Shakespeare across time, starting with Ben Jonson to present day. That means what I want to say, communicate to you is that the British knew how to propagate and establish by cementing a text to its permanence. You need the primary source of the text as well as you need the secondary source to authenticate that text for thousands and thousands of years to come. Shakespeare's productions are creative productions, and critics on Shakespeare, criticism on Shakespeare, are the secondary materials which give permanence to Shakespeare forever. Similarly, when we talk of Indian writing in English, if we go back 60 years ago, 70 years ago, there were not much secondary materials to fall back on. Therefore, most of the studies were Eurocentric. That means even we were to discuss Milk Raja Anand's Kuli or Untouchable, we had to apply the models of the West to bisect and trisect the Indian texts born in India, written for the Indian audience, and contextualized within India. You know what happened to Milk Rajanan's Untouchable? He was not getting a publisher, and he got hold of, we all know, E.M. Foster, who wrote the preface to Untouchable and got a brilliant audience worldwide later on. By now, Indian writing in English is an important body of resources, primary resources, but at the same time, we have Indian English criticism, which is a supplement. I should not say as a supplement, which is also a main course. But together, Indian writing in English is an important body of texts worldwide. You know, by this particular thought, I want to mean that there was a kind of a hesitancy to accept Indian writing in English as the classics in Europe and in different power positions 70, 80 years ago. But if we look into the developments in 70 or 80 years of time, Indian writing in English has established a different, unique body of resources, which is a permanent seat of knowledge, which no other literature, body of literature from any plural space can compete with. My point is, if we look into any foreign country, there is monolingualism and monoculturalism. So, there are not much plural space to look at, but writing from the mosaics of culture, plural spaces like India and some parts of Africa, I think, are health because monolingualism can bore you, monoculturalism can bore you, but an Indian text will never bore you. It is an unfathomable depth of knowledge, scholarship, wisdom, and it has the wisdom of more than 5,000 years of old civilization. No other country, except for some countries in Scandinavia, some countries, some Aboriginal settlements in different parts of the world, can only think of and estimate the plurality that we have earned. That's why Indians have the epics, the Ramayana, the Mahabharata, and many more to fall back on. But think of the countries without any epic, without any epic, because for writing an epic poem, you need the depth and density of literature, culture, heritage, and of course, the myth and legend creation, which are to be more than several thousand years old. Like the Greco Roman tradition, Indian tradition is as old as the Ganges. By Ganges, I don't want to mean the one sacred river flowing in India, but I want to mean a gamut of knowledge system synonymous with India, which is not only restricted to the Ganges, but also it has been expanded to the banks of Jhilam as well as to Godavari and Krishna and Kaveri and Brahmaputra. By mean, the India which is conceived as one nation, one territory in under one umbrella, but under one umbrella there are fabrics of heterogeneity, and each heterogeneous spike is an essence contributed to the national epoch building process. The nation building process in India after the independence of 75 years plus counting is a process of establishing India in all premier sectors. And one premier sector is, of course, the rich linguistic diversity and its international audience through English and English scholarship. Now, here we let us go back to 1950s. In 1950s, some very important things happened in India to democratize English. One step, we may subscribe to the political views of Nehru or not, but we cannot deny his peerless role in establishing the Sahitya Academy, Central Sahitya Academy in New Delhi. Sahitya Academy took up the vernaculars in India as well as English and made translations possible by promotion of regional languages as well as in English and renderings into different vernaculars from one language to one language, giving India strength and plurality in the proper sense. In 1950s, early part of 1950s, we first saw first proper journal from Mumbai, The Quest by Nissim Ezekiel, who is considered to be the first Indian English poet after Indian independence, according to Bala. But The Quest, published in 1954, got a platform for the Indian writers in English to publish their texts in The Quest. but none other than by Nissim Ezekiel. 1950s made the ground for the Indian scholars to build up their scholarship in profundity. In mid 1950s, we come up with a publisher called Writers Workshop, headed by P. Lal, who did not think publishing English writings by Indians, their first books, are commercial suicides. He conceived and he made the Indian writing in English into the international category by publishing the text single handedly from Kolkata, almost my stone's throw distance from my place in Kolkata. Not even 1 kilometer, 500 meters or so. So by the end of 1950s, we have Sahitya Academy, the Central Academy of Letters for promotion of Indian writings, as well as Indian writings in English. By English, I mean translations. We have great journal called The Quest. We have the publisher who can take up the challenge of publishing Indian writing in English, their first books in English. So 1950s I always consider as the backbone of Indian writing in English. And all students and faculty members from different corners of India should be knowing as the map making period of for Indian writing in English. And all we write in English, which actually germinated like the Gangotri in 1950s. Policy making at the helm, there is a writer. At the helm, by he means the prime minister was also a writer. You know, the discovery of India was written by our honorable prime minister Nehru. So by policy making, by publishing, by writers writing from different platforms, different positions, now in 1950s solidify themselves. 1916 is the fruits we pluck. How? How are the fruits? Because 1960s, early part of 1960s, we see the Indian scholars are being invited to the international platforms for important positions. From your part of the world, from where we are talking, in Rajasthan, not in Punjab, but Rajasthan, Alur Jankinam from Rajasthan University, C.D. Narasimhaya, we all know, from Mysore, and some others were invited as the visiting scholars, visiting Commonwealth scholars. In the then time, it was the term of the Commonwealth, to some of the seats of orthodoxical patterns. By seats of orthodoxical patterns, I mean which were the places they considered Indian writing in English, and they suspected the writing by the Indians in English were mostly, you know, caricatures or a kind of copy works from the proto-romantics and the romantics, as we already know. But by the visits by the Indian scholars in 1960s, also by the Indian writers in India, international writings programs in Iowa, you know, lot of vernacular writers, they took part in Iowa writing process in early 1960s. Shankho Ghosh from Kolkata, who was the first champion in this field in early part of 1960s, he announced the mighty presence of Indian vernaculars in Iowa, and many Tamil, Punjabi, and many other writers from different vernaculars also made themselves visible in international arena in 1960s. Late 1960s and early part of 70s was the most creative part for Indian writing in English, because by now Indian writing in English not only in concentrated only in novel or novella, but also Indian poetry, which was considered to be most difficult task in expressing in English, because you know the British scholarship thought that, by British I mean always Eurocentric scholarship thought that Indians could write novella and novels or non-fictional prose, but poetry to them were not into their blood, because poetry, for writing poetry, they needed some generations of English. But late 1960s and early part of 70s, by the birth of Jayanta Mahapatra, and many important poets from different Bombay school of poets, and by the presence of mighty presence of Jayanta Mahapatra from Cuttack, made an inroad to the democratic process of writing poetry was not restricted into the metro cities of India. It has been expanded to the Mafassal and these villages and towns and cities in different parts of India. And there lies the beauty of India. The beauty of India flourished in the 70s by writings from different parts of India. By different parts of India, I mean, before that, writing in English was considered to be an elite exercise. Therefore, mostly the writing in English came from the metro cities and the big cities. And in late 1970s and early 80s, by the mighty rise of the Indian writers writing in English, it made an inroad to the different markers into Indian writing in English. That means Indian writing in English now, by early part of 1980s, not restricted to one stratified position only. Indian writing in English has been extended to the extreme northeast, extreme different trying situations, people coming from different perspectives, different parameters, and contributing into English. And by the rise of many international diasporic writers in 1980s, as we all know, Salman Rushdie and many others made Indian writing in English a powerful body of literature worldwide. Early part of 1980s saw how Indian writing in English and writers in writing in English, practicing in English, won many accolades in different world literary scenarios. Now, when we talk about different markers and how they made an inroad to Indian writing in English process, giving an identity to Indian writing in English as the most unique, exotic, diverse, inviting, alluring body of discourse, unparalleled in the world, by giving its depth, by means of giving it depth, I mean to say, by the time of mid 1980s, English education has reached to certain level, and policy making position holders by the state governments and the central government, English has almost has become and made an inroad to the hearts of India, and Indians are expressing in English confidently, poignantly, and internationally for international audience. Mid 1980s, with the time of the Indian diaspora, writing from different positions, perspectives, may it be from Australia, may it be from the UK, like, all great writers like, Debjani Chatterjee, Shanta Acharya, Mona Dash, Bashavi Fraser, Usha Kishore, and the Indian diaspora in the UK, many from uh, United States of America, then Australia, and many other positions, they tried to started contributing and pouring into Indian writing in English. And in the 80s, we understand that Indian writing in English has already made into our curriculum. Some universities, like, uh, in the West, some universities in the East, and some universities in the South, they started already a chapter on Commonwealth literature, turning into Indian writing in English. In 1990s, the Indian writing in English became a part and parcel of our learning process. Preferably, in some universities, it was not a mandatory paper, it was a paper one can opt for. In 1990s, we see how Indian writing in English creatively as well as critically gaining momentum. By gaining momentum, I mean we see a flurry of journals, a flurry of resources available to study on Indian scholarship, Indian writing in English, and big libraries are coming up with huge resources for potential works on Indian writing in English. I mentioned two of them very poignantly here. One is Skillet, the American College Madurai, which became an institution for the scholarship on Indian writing in English, as well as uh, you know Nirial Gulbarga, you know the Indian writing in English, the journal along with Gulbarga. So G.S. Balarama Gupta's journal and the library became an important contribution to the building of Indian scholarship in India. What I want to mean is that 1990s there are many takers. Now scholars tend to work on Indian writing in English. Before that, if you are to survive in English departments, you will have to work on either in American literature or the British literature. But 1990s saw a sea change in mental positions. That means we tried to embrace that working on Indian writing in English, working on writing in English from India is a help, not a hindrance. But still, there were hesitancy at some parts of India to embrace. So I know we understand by now the new markers in Indian writing in English, which emerged out of the traditional corners or chapters of knowledge. Uh, the rise of the Northeast is an important parameter in our syllabus formation. You know, 2000 onwards, late 1990 onwards, the Indian writing in English made a mosaic out of the translations. Translations from the basic texts, important texts, vernacular texts into English, and Indian universities have now started and enrolled, or they opened up ventilators, and ventilators became the front gates of studying translation as an important tool to know India. As I personally also believe that if I am to take up one word to describe India, that is India in translations. Because translation is the heart of India. If we are to capture the heart of India, we are to capture the translation of cultures and also translation of local texts, the vernacular texts, powerful vernacular texts into another powerful language that is English. I equally stress the importance of simultaneous learning of my mother tongue as well as my father's tongue, that is, I call English. So both are important in parenting our culture. Similarly, if mother tongue is important part of parenting, and of course the furthest tongue that is English is also an important device of our parenting our culture, tradition, and knowledge system now. The Northeast, which was been ignored for a long, long time from the gamut of knowledge system, learning in English, because think who are present, professors present here who are teaching for more than 20, 25 years of time. May I ask you a question? Did you learn any Northeast text when you were in school or college or the university? The answer is no, because of non translatability. By translatability, I mean there were not many publishers to take up the texts of the Northeast and promote the texts nationally and beyond the terrains of the national borders that means home and the world. By this, I mean when journals became an important source of knowledge internationally after 1995, the Northeast writers started publishing their work in most important visible places in the world. By visible places, I mean where no one can ask the sun not to rise in the east. That means no one can deny the sun rising. So you understand this canon building process, and through canon, how a culture has been transmitted, knowledge is transmitted, is of course very much Brahminical, very much stereotyped. And there are hurdles and oppositions to change things for good, change things, open up for holistic India. By holistic India, I mean India in all parts of India, India in all positions of India. Suppose who are present in this afternoon, I can introduce a text, the first Mijo novel in English, Zorami, 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 Zorami. Zorami in Mizo is flower, is a flower. This is the first English novel by a Mizo written in English. And look at the power hidden in the text. Peerless, because it goes into the diplomacy of politics in the Northeast region, the border, the trauma, the essential post-colonial structures of resistance, local resistance, nationalism, and how a culture is evolving and making the political connections a part of the gamut of the knowledge system. This Zorami is not a book, but a text through which India reads. Similarly, the poems by Mamang Dai, Temsulaao, Rabinas Angam, Malashami Jacob, powerful enough to describe how the Indian Northeast is an important dimension, marker to have an honest presence in the syllabus curriculum within India by the PG boards of studies and the universities. Another important marker of Indian writing in English, that English cracked the social barriers, and anyone can take up English and anyone can write in English and hit back. Remembering the famous text by Bill Ashcroft, Empire Writes Back. Similarly, writing from different positions, Dalits, the communities which were marginalized for a long, long time, who were voiceless for different social reasons, have now their voices. And of course, the subaltern discourse, subaltern studies groups worldwide, including Gayatri Chakravarti Spivak, to Bill Ashcroft, and Lila Gandhi, Aizaz Ahmed, Homi K. Bhabha, Harish Trivedi, and many, many others relentlessly worked in 1980s and 90s on the marginal positions, marginalities, giving shoulders to the people who needed their voices. But mostly these texts were written in the vernaculars. As I already pointed out, how translation became a transformative process in Indian writing in English, and seminal books now being published through OUP, Cambridge University Press, Navana, and many, many important Sage and many other publishing houses, so that important vernacular text written, contextually written in different positions are now being translated and available in English. By making them available in English is a process of building the knowledge and scholarship for future. If we look into now, we have multiple layers of texts and multiple texts which are the parts of knowledge system in the entire world. I may mention a few for all of us. Surviving in My World, Growing Up Dalit by text, autobiography published by Sage Manohar Mauli Vishwas, the autobiography Jhutan, the autobiography of Sharan Kumar Limbale, Akar Masi, the autobiography by Bama from Tamil Nadu, Karukku, all contributed to new ideologies and new parameters to look at Indian knowledge system in totality. Now, why is it so unique? It is so unique because which were not familiar in literary discourse previously for the entire world. How? We can cite examples because if we think of feminism, it was mostly the Eurocentric process, came to India, but remained to a certain tradition or certain layers of our social system, could not penetrate into the stratified situation of India, so that when we think of any Dalit feminism, the Dalit activists think feminism won't describe them appropriately. So they would prefer the term Dalit womanism instead of Dalit feminism. That means in an Indian context, feminism could not penetrate into all the stratified positions because it was a discourse not meant for the Indian stratified positions. When we talk about humanism, it adds the color of the social segments, how they are perceived and how they are convinced and conceived socially. When we think of Bama's Karukku or Kollani Thakur Charal's works, they bluntly speak that we don't embrace the term humanism at all. We don't embrace the term feminism at all. We are better described as humanists because color, stratified positions, context, ethnicity, which were not connected with feminism and which do not describe feminist discourse so much. So looking into Indian writing in English again, from the parameter of Indian knowledge system. By Indian knowledge system, I also mean how the Indian critics contributed to Indian knowledge system. Think, for example, when we talk of Dalit feminism, Dalit humanism, we don't need to read much of the feminist texts in the West. We need the feminist discourse within India as prescribed by Sharmila Rege or Uma Chakrabarti. We have enough discourse on Dalit humanism, Dalit feminism by the Indian scholarship now. But in some universities now, these texts are absent. So when the scholars come to work, they work they work with the European shirt and they wear the European shirt and European trouser and start cultivating the Indian land, which is very much contextualized in Indian prognosis, social prognosis only, which I think is thrice removed from truth. In this afternoon, those students who are present, scholars who are present, if you are working on Indian writings in English, Indian scholarship is so dense, like Reality and Realism, Perishable Empire by Meenakshi Mukherjee. So many texts to mention, fall back on, which are cardinal texts to read Indian texts carefully, poignantly, deeply, suitably, and more appropriately than any foreign text. But sadly, when I, as an adjudicator of PhD thesis, when I get PhD dissertations, suppose at Dalit writings, many works are subversive, but the works theoretical framework start with the Eurocentric model. My humble question and prayers at this afternoon is that how can it be possible without referring to the Annihilation of Caste by Ambedkar, written in early part of 1930s? When I am working on Dalit social issues, annihilation of caste should be our Vedas, should be our ancestral home to start with. We cannot think that our grandfather is always a white man.
So you're not audible to us. There seems to be some internet issue that side. Meanwhile, students, you are requested to type your questions in the chat box if you wish to ask something about the lecture, the topic of the lecture.
I was lost in the process.
No
I was
problem.
describing some problem. But
Right.
let me just give a shape of ending for 5 minutes so that I can be for 10 minutes or more, maybe question answer. Can I take 5 minutes more?
Sure, sir.
Okay. So uh, I think the markers, new markers of Indian writing in English to look at Indian studies in Indian universities, I think we should open up our mind. And we should not forget that our old mother and grandmother are crying to fall them back on them. That means, by this, I mean that may have the models of educations which were very different from now. But our minds were most of the should be suitably free and suitably open to access the knowledge of today's world system. Now, the knowledge is free access. By the rise of online parameters, we can have easy access to world knowledge. And no one can say that this is only the knowledge you will learn. And this is the knowledge is defined. So, unbound sensibility of knowledge, knowledge unbound by the mighty rise of online parameters, which added a new marker of Indian writing in English. Many important voices are heard, and Indians with 4 or 5 generations of English are writing profoundly, confidently, and building up their own idiom. By own idiom, I mean they can write and they can take up any issue they like and transform them into a beautiful world of the nightingales and the world of the daffodils. So, If daffodil was written and not glossed long ago, and we were to read daffodil at schools when the teachers did not see daffodil and students did not see daffodils, now it is turn for the Indian scholars and writers to write about their own parameters, contexts, which where they are in, and transforming them into beautiful, creative, and creative essence. Indians are born with the aroma of creativity. I, as a writer, I always think my 2 3 minutes I'll sum up my experience of the writing process, because prior to that I was a critic. So in the last 2 3 minutes, now see how I give less priority to my creativity than to critical self. This is not done. There are hardly universities in India which tutor students for creativity. But look at the West. Creativity is taken or considered as an art, can be learned and can be tutored. But in Indian universities, colleges, we were not much trained in that way how to give perfection to your creative senses. But Indians are mostly blessed with the aroma of creativity in the languages he or she chooses. Now the selection is his. It is not only that he can fall back on, by he I mean anyone, can fall back on the mother language. Whatever language he can write, she can write, he can write effectively, confidently, and for an international audience. Here lies the birth of a new nation state, which I think is the destination for literary studies in the world. Therefore, Indian scholars are highly acclaimed now. 20 years ago, Indian scholar coming to a remote part of Europe, delivering a talk, only a handful of people were attending. But now, know India, knowing India, curiosity to know about India is more. It's like the depthless seas. Therefore, many creative writers are of prominence in different parts of India, and they are respected like anything. As Indian scholars are honored, and now the confluence of thoughts is the best destination. Therefore, I, and apart from me, myself, many think that the literary online platforms, offline platforms, everywhere you will see the Indians mesmerizing the world. And our lotus is more pronounced than the daffodils pronounced long, long, long away ago. Our crows are more homely than the nightingale used to sing long, long ago. I may sound very much nativist in this afternoon. I have the waters of the Ganges. I have the waters of the Krishna, Kaveri, Brahmaputra, Tapti, and Jhilam. My India is unique India, unparalleled India, which has the depth of the epics, the legends, the myths many nations can never think of. And our culture will never invade anyone. We were invaded, but we look forward to a confluence of cultures, confluence of literary studies by opening up the minds and making an inroad to flowers to be seen, blooming in different parts of India, writing differently, bringing them values, contributing to everyday's life to our future students. My humble request to the Board of Studies members to open up the discourses globally, nationally, from the Kashmir to Kerala, Rajasthan and Punjab to the northeast, and make India the most prosperous nation of the minds and the soul makers to bloom in future. I stop here. I look forward to your questions and curiosities. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, sir. It was a wonderful discourse on the literary studies, and you took us deep into the Indian knowledge systems. And definitely, sir, as you said, we are blessed to have epics where the countries over the globe which do not have the epics, cannot come to our levels. And yes, I would like to congratulate you for introducing us to the Indian writings and the Indian writings, the scene, the given scene where the Eurocentric models, which had to be bisected and trisected in order to study the Indian, in your own, in your words, sir, to effectively study what was being written about. So no doubt India is a nation of linguistic diversity, and sir has very well unraveled the fabrics of heterogeneity and the cementing national spirit which binds us all together, whether it is through the honors of novel poetry, which gained momentum on the Indian literary scene ever since the 50s and 60s to the 90s to the modern times. Sir has given us a roadmap and a direction how the curricula at the university level also needs to incorporate the Indian writings. And let me, sir, just tell you about this, that we at Jagat Guru Nanak Dev Punjab State Open University, the School of Languages has pioneered, and we have exclusive Indian writing papers not only for the master's program but also at the undergraduate level. So we have a number of Indian writers and a number of Indian texts that we are taking up. We are teaching how these traditional corners, as you said, are the ones from where the new trends and the new markers are emerging. So it was wonderful listening to you, sir, that how
Thank you. Thank you.
Indian writers, from being a no man to the one and every man whom the whole world is now listening to. And it also brought to my mind Meenakshi Mukherjee's The Twice Born Fiction. I mean, she also very comprehensively discusses the Indian writing scene. And definitely, I feel the students who could connect with us today were benefited from your lecture. And yes, definitely, this will be available on our YouTube for the future learners, who are coming up. So, any questions from the students who would like to discuss something regarding all this, because sir has very nicely spoken to us about not only the writings, the criticism, the contribution of the Indian writers to theory as well. So talked about Gayatri Spivak, Homi Baba, and also how the translations can be an additional thing, and how the vernaculars that we have in India actually compose a gamut of knowledge which we all need to comprehend. We need to translate and give it to the word other side. So thank you very much, sir. It was lovely having you.
Thank you so much. For anything, just let me know because I'm passionate about it. So you can easily understand. It
Yeah,
could go on for 6, 7 hours.
I know that. I know that. So, Mohanjit, can you just quickly have a look if there is a question there in the chat box? So, how is it? Meanwhile, as he keeps an eye on the chat box, I would just like to know. You just mentioned Zorami, the English novel. So, has the have the universities your side been able to incorporate these in the curriculum? So, you're not audible. Yes.
Sorry, I joined from another
It's okay.
device.
It's
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. Mm. So, any question, please? Yeah.
Yeah. So I was just curious to know whether the Mizo novel that you were talking about has already been adopted by some universities in their curriculum.
Yeah, of course. And you can easily access it. And there are great reviews on this novel because this is one of the very important novels I read in recent times. Zorami, very powerful text. You know, and you will, by reading it, you will understand how powerfully it examines and scrutinizes the diplomacy, the social diplomacy, political positions, and the nation building process from Mizoram and the entire Northeast. This the text is available, and many reviews are also available. And I have an interview with Malashami Jacob, the author, which is also available online.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Monjit, is there a question in the chat box or we call it a day?
No, ma'am, there is no any question in the chat box, ma'am.
Thank you so much. So, on behalf of Jagat Guru Nanak Dev Punjab State Open University, I thank Professor Jaideep Sarangi for enhancing and enriching our knowledge about the Indian writings and Indian knowledge systems, which will be the prevailing force in times to come. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm always there for the university, and I really enjoyed the session. Thank you so much, all concerned. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, sir.
We'll connect again. Thank you.